Hello and welcome to Friday's lesson, where you may get a glimpse of me telling my dog off, but you definitely do get me in my pyjamas and my giant beanbag, so that's fun. So anyway, the reason why I've chosen to do this as a recorded lesson is because you're going to be starting Introduction to Psychology, and I didn't really want you to miss this lesson. I didn't want you to miss this lesson because it's really important, and I want to keep you moving so then we can hopefully get all of the bad stuff out of the way before you start everything else. So you can find these PowerPoint slides, if the teacher hasn't already told you, in P Drive. So you go P Drive, Yates, Year 12 Psychology, I don't know, 2 Intro to Psych, and it's the first one there. You'll find both the PowerPoint slides and the exam questions that you will be doing before our lesson on Monday. So the first thing that we're going to do is the methods of assessing psychological responses, and I've done a little mini lesson on this for the sake of the test, but I'm going to do this to apply in terms of the experiment that we did on Wednesday. So our learning intentions today are the methods of assessing responses in research. You're going to also be looking at the relevance of sample size and population, and the validity of research. And before I start, I feel like I should show you my dog, so then there's proof that the reason why it's bumping is because of him. Everyone meet Reggie. Hello, Reggie. Oh, cute. Okay, now that's over. So by the end of this, you'll be able to define the 3 ways of assessing data and hopefully give examples for each. And I'm sorry because I'm going to be really distracted because Married at First Sight is on and I really like that show, and it's the dinner party and oh my god, it's so intense. So this is in part of the research design. So the first part that we do is develop the hypothesis, and that's what you will be doing as part of your proposal. And then you're going to be doing the research design. I forget, you can't see me pointing, down to data collection that you can't see because apparently my screen's not big enough for that. Data analysis, and then conclusion and recommendations, and that's basically just what you do in your conclusion. So you know that we're collecting data, and you know what they all mean because most of you got the answer right in the test, which I've been marking also behind me. Be impressed. I'm on fire tonight, but I probably won't be after this because so good. Anyway, so the data becomes the evidence that we rely on to draw conclusions. So you're going to rely on your data that we have just collected on Wednesday, which is not today for you. It'll be Friday. Okay, so I've already told you this. So there are 2 ways that we can do this. There is quantitative, which is numbers, or qualitative, which is language. And they are the only 2 types of data, so qualitative and quantitative, and most of you got that from the test. So, my dog's fighting me. Okay, so quantitative, counting the amount of times a baby smiles, is quantitative, and then of course qualitative, recording a participant's response. So most of the data that we collected, in fact, all of the data that we collected on Wednesday is all quantitative because it was numerical. So if we were to do a focus group, here he is annoying me, if we were to do a focus group, then that would be qualitative data, and it would be subjective. All of what we did was subjective, except one thing, the heart rate, which was objective. So here we are, we've got objective, which is observable data, and then we have subjective, which is self-reports. So I've already told you about this many times. So objective is observable. It's something that the participants don't need to give you, and subjective are self-reports. So it's something the participant is giving you themselves. And I really hope that my dog isn't distracting you, because he's doing pretty well at not distracting me. At least he's not barking. Okay, so objective data is based on quantitative measures. We can't get objective qualitative. Yes, we can. No, we can't. We can't get objective qualitative because the participant needs to give it to us in order for it to be spoken. So it's all subjective. So it's so fast. This is based on the measurements of the participant's response that can be directly observed. So physical, real, and this is mostly free from bias, except if you are doing observations of behaviour, then it is all completely biased because it is all what you think it is. For example, counting the number of times a baby smiles is objective, or the heart rate that we did. So the heart rate that we did on Wednesday, that is objective because it is observable. It's something that you don't have to give yourself. Well, you do, but you don't have to give it verbally. Subjective data is all based on self-reports. So it could be about feelings, it could be about thoughts, it could be about behaviour that we can't observe. So, for example, drug use. We can observe it, but it's not really ethical to observe it, so you have to get that subjectively from the participants. Or criminal behaviour. It's not ethical to observe it without reporting it, so you have to get it subjectively. So, for example, recording a participant's response in a clinical interview is subjective. We also have the subjective attitude scores on Wednesday as well, just to put it into context for you. So these are put into 3 different terms, and if you're in the classroom, you can go into the back wall, and I have posters that reiterate this, which is good, because, you know, I made them this time last year, and I was feeling pretty artsy, but they're pretty lame. So we've got objective, quantitative. So here I've underlined the O, and I've underlined... Why did I underline the Q? And I should have underlined the N. So observable, objective, quantitative, numerical. So these are things like standardized tests, like IQ tests. They are all numerical. The tests that we did to measure our attitudes are all subject. No, they're not. Ignore that one part. I wish I could rewind. I wish I had the skills to edit, but I don't. Physiological measures, so the heart rate. That was the only objective quantitative part that we did. Yeah. And then behaviour counts. So counting the amount of smiles, counting how many times someone is happy about an object. And that's how we would identify the attitudes of things too, which most of you actually talked about in the test, which was awesome to see. And then we have subjective quantitative, which is exactly what I was talking about before. So questionnaires with rating scale items. So we had 2 different kinds of rating scales. Well, actually we had 3. No, we had 2 different kinds of rating scales. So we had one where you drew a line from 1 to 10, and another one where you did a scale of a 0 to 7, I think. And that is subjective quantitative because you're doing it yourself and it's numerical. And then we have subjective qualitative. So the participant is doing it themselves, and it's qualitative, so it's language. So these are things like questionnaires with open-ended items, verbal responses, visual responses. So kids that can't speak yet, they can submit drawings and we can get subjective responses based on that. Like the Rorschach test. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but you will in personality. It's quite exciting. So these would be things like a focus group if we were to do a focus group. So this data is organised and it's summarised and interpreted into 2 days. into two ways. So descriptive statistics, things like the mean, the median, the standard deviation, correlations, all the things that you do in maths is quantitative. Okay, so you've done this stuff before. I know that you have. Well, you should have anyway. I don't know whether you remembered or not. And then qualitative data does a content analysis, which is where we basically just look at all of the data, think of read it again, watch it again, come up with different themes, and base our conclusion on the findings that we found under the same themes, and that's what we need to fix or whatever. Okay, so they are the three different methods of assessing psychological responses. Hello, Fetchy. He's just staring at me. It's weird. So we've got objective quantitative, which is observable. It's numbers. So in our test, in our experiment, it was the heart rates. Heart rate, objective quantitative. Okay, behaviour counts, objective quantitative. And then we have subjective quantitative. The participant does it themselves, and it is numerical. So questionnaires with rating scale items, how we get people's attitude. And then we have subjective qualitative, which is the participant doing it themselves, and it is language. So that's pretty straightforward. Alright, so and then, of course, we have the population and the sample. So this is all to do with research. If you haven't figured that out, hopefully this topic won't take too long, because I can rely on the previous students of last year to help those students this year understand it in terms that students do, and not in my terms using ridiculous examples. Reggie, he better not be peeing down the hallway. So the population is the group of people that you are doing your entire research sample from. So, for example, our experiment that we did on Wednesday would be based towards teenagers in the Riverland, for example, or it could be safe students all over Australia. So that is our population. Our sample is the subsection of research participants that we've collected that sample from. So the sample would be you guys. So our whole population is senior students in the Riverland. Our sample are you. So you guys are now the representatives of that entire population. And what we need to figure out is whether you are representative of that whole population. Look at him, he's being cute. Hello. Say hello, Reggie. Look, it's you. Look up here. He's not impressed. Okay. Now I've lost where I was. Alright, so we need to figure out whether you are representative of the entire population. So think about what the Riverland is made up of. We have adults. No, they're not our population, so they don't matter. We have children. Not our population, so they don't matter. So you have to think about the different cultures that are in our region. So there's a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of different cultures even in our school. So are you guys an accurate representation of that? Do you represent all of those? Do you represent all of those cultures? Genders. So you guys are a class of 17, and I think there's like 4 males in there. Ow! There's 4 males in there. Is that representative of all the males of the Riverland? I'll leave that up to you to decide. Things like age. So if we're leaving it up to teenagers, are we accurately representing the 13-year-olds of the Riverland? Or should we... I think we actually... Sorry. Are we accurately representing all of the ages, or should we narrow down our population? So this is not working. We need to consider both the size and who is in that population in order to collect our sample. So if I was to do it with a representative sample, should I have randomly done it around the school? Should I have done it randomly around the entire Riverland? Would that have been better? Oh, look. Now we're being cute, Reggie. Yeah. So this is just an example of it. So you've got the target population, which is the wide big cloud. Then you've got the sampling population, and you randomly select a few of those from that. No, you're not being cute anymore. Stop. For example, all childcare workers, and then we've got the total of 20 childcare workers, and then we've got a sample of the childcare workers in there. So the best way to get an accurate sample is to randomly select your sample of people. Yeah, this is not working. Reggie, I'm not your toy. Don't. Oi! This is me punishing a dog. I'm such a... He's stuck on my arm and I don't know how to fix this. Okay. I was chewing on my laptop. So we need to randomly allocate these things. These people, not things. So if I were to randomly choose 20 people instead of just saying, hey, you guys are my class, you're going to take this test, that would be better. And of course the sampling error is when it doesn't have a mirror image of the population. So we are likely to have a sampling error because we only have 4 males. We don't accurately represent every gender, every age, every culture, nothing. We are not pretty, I mean, we're pretty good, but not in terms of, woo, there we go, not in terms of samples, we're not. And that's nothing on you guys, it's probably just me as a subject. Anyway, so now I'm going to go on to validity and reliability, and I'm not actually going to do this because I do an entire lesson on it later, but I'm just going to give you this, and then you're going to look back on it later and it's going to be so familiar. Okay, so we're going to look back on our learning intentions. So we've done the methods of assessing psychological responses. Remember, there are 3 of them: subjective, subjective quantitative, subjective qualitative, and objective quantitative. So make sure you have those down pat. So hopefully you will be able to define those 3 ways and give at least one example from each of those. And then of course the relevance of sample size and population representativeness. So you'll know what makes a good sample and you'll know what's relevant. So what I want to make you do now, not that I can really make you do anything, but you know, I'd really like it if you did, is have a go at these questions. So the doctors at a hospital are interested in the emotional experience of their patients. Describe one subjective quantitative method of assessing these emotional responses. So remember back to our first lesson, you've got the lead-in verb, describe, and then you've got the qualifier, so you've got to describe one, and then the subject-specific language, subjective I don't know what he just did. Gee, I thought he was being so good, and he was just like leading up to that. So, where was I? Subjective quantitative method. So that's the that is the subject-specific terminology, and then of course you've got to apply it to the example. So you've got to make sure that it is specific to hospitals and doctors and the emotional experiences. And I will give you some examples when I go back on Monday. So be nice to the teacher. I really hope that you are. Unlike my dog, who is not being nice to me at all. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I've made it worthwhile watching, because I have enjoyed this video. It was a great experience. That was a vein. If I'm dead, it's because he bit me in my vein. Anyway, so I'll see you Monday. I hope this is worthwhile for you.